Hello, and welcome to episode 1 of season 2 of the Todd and Taylor Show. I am Todd A, and with me is
Taylor Trask. Hey, everybody.
So we're doing, if you follow our other podcast, which is called Wednesday in Westeros, we are doing kind of a new thing this season where we're running, we just separated out all our Game of Thrones talk. So you are tuned into the podcast that is anything but Game of Thrones, basically.
no tea. But there's other cool stuff to talk about besides Game of Thrones, as you'll come to find. So these are going to be, if you love the last season of the Todd and Taylor Show, very similar, just shorter, more compact, and there's a slight twist in that I think one of us is going to more or less interview the other person on a specific topic. Is that right?
Yeah, let's see how that goes today. So I'm actually gonna we'll just skip my intro notes and let's just jump to it, because the other thing we're trying to do is keep these a little brief so that season 2 of the Todd and Taylor Show will be like a brief commute. You
exactly.
You put on the podcast, 20 to 30 minutes later, you're done with it. You're not involved in some long discussion. So
that's right.
Today we are going to talk about the movie Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice.
Yes.
We both saw this late. Neither of us ran to it on opening weekend, although I tried. It was sold out. And then I just kind of, it got some bad reviews, and honestly, that did kind of affect my enthusiasm to go see it. But I saw it a couple weeks ago. You just saw it this week, correct?
Correct.
And how did you see it? Was it in 2D, 3D, IMAX? What'd you do?
Well, I debated that. I actually called you going, which one's the better one? I was confused about what was still in IMAX here. It actually is not still in IMAX here, but honestly, that's probably better. I'm glad I saw it the way I did. I just saw it on a like one of those just regular high def 2D screens, decent sized theater. There's like 6 of us in it at a 7 o'clock. It shows you how much the audience is tapered off, I think. What is it, Tuesday or Wednesday night? But still,
and we're 5 weeks out from launch or something, or 4 weeks. I mean, we're away. Yeah.
It was Easter weekend, so it was that weekend. So it's been a while.
Well, and I saw it in the middle of the day on possibly a weekday. Yes, it was a Friday afternoon at like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So it was just myself and one other person in the theater.
Oh, geez. Now, I don't want to get off on a tangent. Have you found that drastically affects how you watch movies, depending on how many people are there, the tone of the audience, the mood of the audience, all that kind of stuff?
I think it does, right? I mean, and I've never been to this place, but you have sung the praises of the Alamo Draft House. And so I would kind of assume that, having an audience for that, even if you're all sitting in silence, you sort of feel this, the shared experience, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm one of the few people on Earth who apparently love the hell out of Iron Man 2. And I think that's because I saw it back when they did midnight showings like 5 years ago. They don't really do midnight showings anymore. They do 8 p.m. Thursday night showings. I think because the staff of the theater wants to just get the hell out of there and go home and not be there till 3 a.m. So back when they did true midnight showings, Iron Man 2 was May of 2010. And I saw it with an amazing audience. Like the energy, like the line outside was cool. It was at this theater that I used to go to exclusively for midnight showings, so it was kind of known to attract a really good crowd. Even opening day, lines and audiences were great too. So I remember seeing it there that night, and it was just it hit me in a much different way than I think most people because of that audience. If I had just seen it by myself or later on with a smaller group, I don't think I would have liked it as much as I do. But yeah, that's always kind of the example I go towards.
I do think it affects it. What I think affects even more, and this is one of the things that I shared with you offline, was I saw it in 3D. And so, of course, by the time I saw it, they had downgraded it into a smaller theater. And it just, the 3D just didn't work physically in that theater. There was sort of some peripheral lighting that they had, like the exit signs and stuff. And it was just, it was kind of like, I'm getting this weird reflection off the glasses, and part of that was because there weren't people there, and there was that weird barrier, in the middle that separates the very front row from the kind of theater seating that goes up, and so I honestly the it was so distracting that I got up and moved to the second row and twisted my body to where I was staring straight up at the screen, which wasn't really any better, but did at least help some of the lighting problems. So more. I think the audience impacts it, but there's such a thing to the to the like physical environment of the theater. And what I think is so weird is that when I hear comments from friends about how they don't like seeing movies in the theater, or they don't care, it's too expensive, or blah blah blah, I always think, that's because you're in a city with shitty theaters,
Yeah,
and we brought that up before. Like, it's just if you don't have a great Alamo Draft House, or some of the places that I went in California, like, you're just not going to feel like it's worth the big screen experience, One
little technical sort of guffaw that I noticed, and I don't know if this was everywhere, or just this theater. I saw it on an HD, like one of those true HD screens or projectors. They usually like this is true HD, like at the beginning. And it was weird. The opening, and we'll talk more about the sequence and stuff, but the opening sequence looked crystal clear. Everything was great. I noticed throughout the movie, though, there were increasingly a couple of shots, a lot of them in the dark, where it looked grainy and fuzzy and not at all like HD. And the resolution kept changing, and it was jarring enough where I was like, what is going on here? And then, during like the fight sequence or something, it would come back. So I don't know if it was shot that way, if they actually had low res footage they were using in spots, or if that was just the print was somehow bad or grainy, or the projector was somehow not rendering it correctly. I don't know, but if anybody's out there listening and has had a similar experience, I'd love to know, because it was jarring enough and not consistent enough to where I was really wondering what was up.
That ties in so well to what I was saying, and makes such a better point, which is I think what I hear from people who don't like seeing movies in theaters anymore, because they all figure like, I've got an HD at home and I've got surround sound, that's the bad experience. It's like, it's not that the movie is bad in the theater, it's that the theater is bad, and people are sort of thinking that has to do with the movie, So I mean, my guess from what I saw, I didn't see anything. I didn't notice anything grainy. It was definitely dark, and I know there's definitely a difference between they do different cuts of movies. There's a 3D edit that's colored one way, and there's a 2D edit that's colored one way, and an IMAX is colored the other way, because they have to factor in how much light is going to be pushed out through that projector. And in some of those instances, I think you see a movie, 4 or 5 weeks into its run, where they've moved it to the, downgraded to the smaller theater, and they don't have as strong a projector, and whatever's happening. I don't necessarily know all the technical stuff that goes in there. I would think that they're kind of all equivalent, but with digital.
This is why I appreciate people like Quentin Tarantino, who cares a hell of a lot about that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
When he was doing the roadshow for Hateful Eight, not to get off on a different movie entirely, but when he was doing the roadshow for Hateful Eight, I remember he was very specific about the theaters that he chose and the way the print was delivered. Like, he's like, I want you to experience this exactly this way. And exactly in this setting. He cares a lot about that in theater experience. So I really appreciate, he may seem a little old school sometimes, and that, I will never not use film and blah, 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 but he cares enough about the sitting in the theater experience as an experience. And I appreciate his thought into those kinds of things. I wish other directors or other studios even would. Right. I know when you get into the 4,000, theater, or the 4,000 screen, release strategy, it gets a little hard, but still it would be nice to kind of have a better, and I know Alamo does a lot to sort of tamper down and really make that a consistent experience for them. But enough technical stuff. We've been boring people with this technical stuff. Let's get into the meat of the matter.
Yeah, totally. Let's jump in. So what was your overall impression of Batman v Superman? I know this because you texted me the day after, but let our listeners know.
Well, okay, I could sum it up thusly. It's not often I find a movie that I equally love and hate. And I would much rather it just be terrible or good, because when it's this way, I walk out and it's just like, when you walk out of a great movie, you're like, oh my God. And you feel like you've disappeared, from the world for 2 hours or whatever it is. And you come out, you're like, oh my God, the world's still here. That feeling of I was transported. And then there's the terrible movies where you walk out and you're like, that was just a massive waste of my time. And you're very singular about how you look at that movie. When it's kind of a little of both, it kind of almost gives you a headache, because you're just like, And then you're trying to rationalize the good parts and rationalize the bad parts. And like, did I really understand it this way? So it was like a compliment sandwich as a movie, really. There were like, it started off just amazing. And then there were just like every other scene was like, well, why is this here? Then it would rebound with something cool. And then just, it was kind of distracting that way. So it was kind of an exhausting sit, honestly.
So what were some of those things that made you bounce back and forth? Like, what was a high point?
Yeah.
And then I'll follow that up with what was a low point.
Well, I mean, to start off with just the opening sequence.
Oh my God.
The opening sequence, even though we don't need to,
I know.
It's been said so many times by so many other podcasts and people that, we don't need to see the death of the Waynes anymore. We know, but I will say this, much like Watchmen's opening sequence, Zack Snyder knows how to stage an opening sequence really well, very beautifully shot. And you had freaking, the guy who played Jeffrey Dean Morgan is Thomas Wayne, for God's sake. So you got the guy who played the comedian, bizarrely, and now Negan on Walking Dead, bizarrely and he did great. He was like, I could easily see him being Thomas Wayne. But then they took that masterfully into, and the most compelling part of the whole thing for me was the Bruce Wayne POV of the events of Man of Steel, where he's, driving his Subaru or whatever through downtown Metropolis to, and you're seeing that devastation, like 9/11 style from his point of view. It was arresting. It was really like, it took what was just kind of, I was really kind of lukewarm, cold on Man of Steel. Like, there's just so much of it just was heartless. And even all those fighting sequences, I'm just like, I just didn't care. So all of a sudden now you have this very human component and sort of observation of those scenes. And it gave them I almost want to go back and rewatch Man of Steel now, knowing that's how other people saw it, and just seeing
justified Man of Steel to me, because Man of Steel to me was I enjoyed so many superhero movies. I enjoy them all the way up until they get to the catastrophic apocalyptic event, and that was one of those where I was like, oh my God, it's like you have to this thing is going to destroy the entire earth. Like, that's the stakes that you've accelerated to. But seeing the Bruce Wayne response to it, I think was such a good way of showing us that in context and making us feel a little bit more connected to this giant destruction that in Man of Steel we felt a little disconnected from.
Yeah, absolutely. So. And just it takes it from being like just another episode of Dragon Ball Z where it's just, mindless destruction to like, oh, there's consequences to this kind of thing happening to alien gods fighting it out and, just sort of whipping each other. And it bugs me a little bit because some of that felt like a response to the fan criticism of Man of Steel. Like, there was just needless destruction. However, if it was deliberate for that reason, it worked, I don't mind that it turned out that way. So that was awesome. That was one of the many just high points for me. And it's it really started the movie off where because I went in a little bit suspicious, just like, well, we'll see. And then that kicked off.
So what was the low point?
Anything involving Jesse Eisenberg, like anytime that dude was on screen, I was one of the people when they cast him and everybody was like, oh God, what? And I was like, no, wait, this could be really cool. This could be awesome. If I'm not even saying he had to do his Mark Zuckerberg impression. That would have been fine. I thought he would. I'm like, he's very in the same way that when they cast Andrew Scott to play Moriarty on the Sherlock series, it was the last version of Moriarty you would have expected. Like if they had actually told everybody this is Moriarty, and now we're familiar with who Andrew Scott is, but at the time, I think a lot of people would have been like, what, him? No. So they kind of just dropped him in at the last episode. And oh my God, it's so new and fresh that it was again, arresting. You're like, why? I can't keep my eyes off this guy. I thought maybe Eisenberg would bring that kind of twist to Lex Luthor. I'm like, well, let's give him a chance. And I don't know what movie he thought he was in, but it wasn't this. It's like every line of dialogue that dude had, everything, it just like it's like he just kind of bombed in from some other movie and just kind of did his thing. I don't know. And maybe you can explain this to me. What did he want? What was his character motivation? Well, how did he, and on top of that, how is what he did, how were his actions going to get him what he wanted? And I think like if that was more clear, I wouldn't be so confused, but it just,
And to deflect that question a little bit more, I think we've talked about this probably in a previous podcast, and if not, here we go. That may be one of the weaknesses of the DC movie universe. Because I think I think that's a criticism you can make of every Lex Luthor ever.
Really?
I mean, in Superman Returns, it's Kevin Spacey just shows up and he's already like wicked. The first scene is him getting this dying widow to sign over all her possessions to him. There's never any backstory or any explanation or, why is he evil? And Joker in Dark Knight, we get a couple of crazy scenes where he's, explains like how he got his scars and stuff. And you realize like, well, he's lying to me every time he tells me another story about this, but it at least speaks to his background a little bit, but still he's very much just like
but what he wants, even though I don't like it.
That's true.
I don't like this as a character motivation. He at least says, I'm into chaos. And it's a little lazy, but he flat out says, like, I just want to see the world. I mean, and then Michael Caine kind of reinforces it.
In Dark Knight Rises, like, he has that great speech to Two-Face, which I think explains everything. You know, I am an agent of chaos.
Yeah.
But that's just a problem with Lex Luthor is he's always kind of two-dimensional. And I guess you and I both, I was a little bit more cynical about Eisenberg being in the role, but I was at least hopeful that, there's some direction there. There's something they're going to give him that explains that. And I guess one of the things we talked about was, again, offline was maybe they cut some backstory from him because he does, allude to his father and the company and the family home and stuff like that. So we can only guess that maybe there's 30 minutes of him,
It felt like
explaining his daddy issues.
It felt like he was a kid who had been away at summer camp, like a rich kid spoiled summer camp, watching like really old school, like superhero cartoons with his friends all summer long, came back and was like, I want to do that. And was like, and just kind of concocted every like weird, like every plot and James Bond, villain plan and everything. It felt like as much as they were trying to make this like the dark and gritty, real DC universe, they threw him in and all his motivations were just cartoonish. And, of some other, like I said, he would have been a great villain. Like, he and, in those original Roger Moore Bond movies would have right in. I was waiting for Oddjob to come in with a hat and like, throw it and like slice a statue in half or something. Like, it's just like, that's what he was playing. And I'm like, this doesn't match.
Yeah, Oddjob's in the Sean Connery movies.
Well, even so, like that would have been,
Is part of it like Eisenberg's youthful appearance?
No, that didn't bug me at all. No.
That bothered me because I always felt like there's a teenager in the world of adults. Whereas Lex Luthor to me has always seemed maybe older than Superman. And, I guess the idea to have Lex Luthor as sort of the tech company, the startup kid, that wears sneakers and is, really informal and kind of, snotty to the people around him in business. I guess that's a new, that's like the current spin on Luthor or something. But casting the guy that played Mark Zuckerberg was just too on the nose for me.
Yeah, and I agree. It would have been even more on the nose though to have Bryan Cranston or Terry O'Quinn pop up, and it's like, and as much as I wanted that, I'm glad they didn't do that because it would have been. The whole movie was so just dour and, there were only two characters who ever smiled, and it was Alfred and Diana Prince. Everybody else was just like so miserable the whole time. So like if you cast Bryan Cranston and Terry O'Quinn, they're going to give amazing performances, but they're just going to double down on this like serious, dark, it's like, so I feel like what they're probably doing in the casting, like, well, we need to offset that somehow. I know, let's get Eisenberg into, Riddler it up and like do, whatever the hell character he's doing and kind of inject some levity. I think that's what it seems like he was supposed to be there for. He was like he was like, like whatever levity we need, Jesse, just go crazy. Do whatever you want. Just bigger, crazier. Like we need to, I feel like that was what someone was poking him to do that. And I don't think it was his own choice. It didn't feel like it was his own choice a lot because I've seen him in movies where he's really good and really subtle and really, he can deliver. As much as a lot of people kind of rag on Adventureland, he's great in Adventureland. Like he's capable of this more underplayed, subtler kind of thing. So I'm just like, who's poking him? Was Snyder just like bigger. We're going to do it, take 4, bigger, Jesse. Come on. Like, I feel like that's what was going on. They could have, I'll put it this way. If they had made him bald to start with, they got rid of that ridiculous haircut. And because it looked like a wig the entire time, it looked like something Roger, an American Dad, would wear, right? It looked like something that just was like, and that just made it even more like, what is happening right now? So they made him just get rid of that as a distraction and made him like completely like the cool, almost like the oh God, who plays Poe Dameron? What the hell is that guy?
Oscar Isaac
in the movie Ex Machina. Like where he's just kind of cool and laid back and, there's something not right with him, but you can't put your finger on what it is. Like Oscar Isaac in Ex Machina would have been an amazing Lex Luthor. So if Eisenberg had just been that and had been just like laid back and chill to the point where like instead of being crazy and weird and sinister, he was just like, overly friendly and it would have been more terrifying because he would have been like, here's this dude who's like, rich and he inherited his father's company. And he's like, you know what, we're not going to be the stuffy corporate thing my dad wanted. I'm going to be a lot more cool, a lot more transparent, and really milking that sort of millennial, like, hey, we're all, it's transparent and we're trying to do good for the world. And meanwhile, he's got like these machinations of like evil that he's not putting out there in Front Street. Like that would have been so much.
Yeah, Oscar Isaac in Ex Machina is a way more terrifying Lex Luthor than Isaac is as Lex Luthor. Yeah, that is such a good call. So you mentioned one of those characters who smiles being Diana Prince.
Yep.
What did you think of Wonder Woman?
I thought this entire thing, this entire endeavor was a $500 million Wonder Woman marketing campaign, because like the whole the one thing that I left the theater with was I'm so torn, but God damn it, I can't wait for this Wonder Woman movie. Yeah. Like every time Gal Gadot was on screen, it was just magical. Like even if she didn't say anything at all, she could just wander in with like a dress and like kind of look at Bruce Wayne kind of accusingly or something. Like I'm like, I want more of this. So when she finally rolls in, and part of me is kind of really, really, really wishing they hadn't revealed her in any way before the movie. Imagine if you had gone in not knowing that Wonder Woman was even in it, that Gal Gadot was playing, like knowing none of that, and all of a sudden this woman pops up. You're like, oh my God, is that Diana Prince? And they don't even say her name until she exits the plane. And imagine like if you didn't know that, and you get to that scene where all of a sudden she's watching and she's leaving the plane, like Miss Prince. You're like, oh my God, and then like think about how exciting it would have been if she. And then that was the big twist that she.
Well. You're right. That would have been incredible. I do think, though, that it was a big enough twist for me just that she had such a large role in it because and so I would kind of guess that some of that was managing expectations on their part. Like they had to show her in the trailer because they knew it's going to leak that we've got someone cast as Diana Prince.
Yeah.
Much in the way that I anticipated Barbara Gordon making an appearance somewhere because I know who's been cast as Barbara Gordon. So it was like, there's going to be some redhead as Babs or something.
Well, now in the extended edition, there's going to be some
right. Well, so I mean that. It was such a good setup for Wonder Woman, and especially because even when it was revealed, whom they'd cast as Wonder Woman, and that brief scene that we had of her in the trailer, I people were kind of knocking it, before the movie even came out, and then the movie I think did a great job of upsetting those expectations. And really,
I've yet to meet one person who's like, oh man, she was lame. Like everybody's like, oh my God, like more of this. And it's telling too that once she joins the fight, notice how the camera always puts her front and center, and Batman Superman behind her, like to the side. Like if it makes her like, if anything, she's the leader of the Justice League based on all this stuff. And I know it's been covered to death, but Jesus, like during that fight scene where she actually, she gets her ass knocked down, and all of a sudden she kind of smiles and like, it's like she was holding back. It was very Dragon Ball Z. It was very much like Goku, like, oh yeah, like let me show you my real trick. It felt, I got that vibe. And of course the soundtrack for her was just like every time that drum came on screen. They did it a couple times. They almost did it a little too much because I'm like, the first time it happened, I'm like, oh God, this is her theme. This is what everybody's been talking about. And then it popped in one or two more times, but it's still, when it popped in the battle scene, I was just like, oh God, this is so good. This is just exactly what it should be.
Bringing up the battle scene, I mean, was Doomsday too monstrous and destructive and nonsensical? I mean, were those stakes too big for us?
I don't even think they were. Again, because Eisenberg Luthor was like the sort of the instigator of that. Like, I just didn't. It was just a monster of the week to me. You know, the fact that I don't even know if we should call it Doomsday. It was just kind of like, you know, it was Gray Hulk, or what was the thing that in the Edward Norton Hulk? What was the Abomination? It was basically that CGI character that they just had saved on a floppy disk somewhere. Hey, let's give it a spike or two and call it. I mean, it just had that vibe. So it wasn't, you know, it could have been, if it had personality, you know, if it retained some of Zod's personality, that would have been, you know, that could have been cool. If it wasn't like, you know, 5 stories taller than it was as a person, like that would have been cool. I just felt like it was, you know, it was a foil, nothing more.
Yeah.
But again, regardless, it was still cool as hell to see her in action fighting against it, you know. Well, and then seeing her whip, and then seeing like even like her whip out her lasso and like, you know, hold it, and then just like, oh my god, like just it makes me really. Again, I am more excited. This whole thing was just like a giant commercial for get ready, like next year you're gonna see more of this. Yeah. It's like, yep, I will be first in line.
Well, I mean, I came out of the movie really loving it and going, what the hell was everybody thinking of when they gave it negative reviews? I mean, not that I thought it was brilliant, but I loved it, and a big part of it was Wonder Woman, and as you know, I don't want to say it was dumb, but as you know, as I don't know, as tropey as that Doomsday, you know, bad guy fight was, at least it was sort of manageable. Whereas sort of the Man of Steel, you know, world engine that Zod brings to Earth, I felt like. Yeah. This is a crazy amount of like stakes that you've raised here.
Yeah, but at least I mean that,
you know, I just, and I liked that moment where all of a sudden it was like, okay, Superman and Batman are, you know, like kind of figured out like there's a bigger enemy here. All
right, let's talk about that though, because like that was the most horseshit part of the entire thing. The entire thing was predicated on exactly. The entire movie was predicated on both guys getting duped by Lex Luthor, one who should have been smart enough to see through that.
True.
You know, and the other who was just like, I don't, you know, the whole, it was like, these two guys are going to fight. I mean, they're not even, Batman, like Bruce Wayne had good reason to not trust him, but like he could have put, you know, he could have surveilled him. He could have done all the detective-y things that Batman's known to do, instead of just being like, you know, if there's a 1% chance, we have to take it as an absolute certainty. You know, like that whole thing was just like, I felt like Alfred made a better Batman than Bruce Wayne did. Like again, Wonder Woman was one of the things I love. I love Jeremy Irons. He's the best Alfred I've ever seen. And like, he was so even-minded and even-tempered about it. He was smart. He was mechanical. He was like all the things that Affleck was not. It was like Affleck was just kind of like the muscle, and you know, all the scenes were about him, you know, lifting weights and, you know, doing, you know, shooting people down with guns and shit. And then Alfred's the guy who's like actually researching stuff and actually like fixing things and like thinking methodically. And I'm like, dude, he should just be Batman. Like that's what I was expecting this to be. So the fact that these two guys are fighting on these kind of false pretenses and weak pretenses at that, and then the fact that they made up, quote unquote, so fast, you know, and it really hit me, and I just really was like, it deflated me when, you know, after they're like, your name's Martha, or your mom's Martha, my mom's Martha. Okay, cool. Right. And it's like, let's be friends. And then when Batman goes to save Martha Kent, he's like, I'm a friend of your son's. I'm like, no, you're not. You just tried to kill him 10 minutes ago. Like, you just tried to flat out murder, and not even murder him. You scarred him on the face. Like you branded him like you do all the other criminals you deal with. Like, what are you talking about? Like, it was such a weird, flimsy, you know, I like these two, here are two guys. Like, I was much more interested in the Diana Prince Bruce Wayne dynamic, because there was something where these two people were like, ooh, they're mysterious, and they kind of like, that was the burgeoning of a relationship that actually worked. These other two guys, especially, you know, like when, you know, spoilers, after Superman dies, quote, you know, Bruce Wayne's at the grave. He's like, I failed him. I'm like, yeah, you tried to kill him, and then magically that, what is what is going on right now? Oh, so I can't disagree with any of that. That, especially the Martha moment was so
corny. It was so corny though that I did not predict it coming. But I did think that up until the Luthor, I guess, kidnapping Lois Lane, and maybe I'm not remembering all of it so perfectly, but I did think, at least the intro of it gave Bruce Wayne tons of reasons not to trust Superman. But I agree with you, like, he definitely should not have been manipulated so easily by Luthor. Yeah. He should have been able to see, to do some detective work and figure that out ahead of time. I didn't expect Superman to go, well, if I got to kill Batman, I got to kill Batman and just fly over there.
Well, and he didn't. He did that reluctantly. At least he was like, I don't need. He's not my enemy.
But it was that other weird trope of like, why don't you just tell Batman what you're doing? Why don't you fly over there and that's the first thing you say to him or whatever?
But he did. That was the first. He and Batman had nothing. He was already like, no, this is gonna be too much fun. I'm not gonna listen to what you have to say. I feel like you take Caesar Romero Luthor, and like you put him like he's younger than Bruce Wayne by far. They're both equally wealthy. How the hell does he know A, Batman's real identity, B, Superman's real identity, C, the ability to manipulate both of those guys? And here you have like what's supposed to be like the ultimate, Sherlock Holmes plus James Bond character who couldn't see any of that. Right. I'm like, what? You had just as many, if not more resources, Bruce Wayne. You could have easily figured this, and if it was something where, I would rather the fight have been purely based on what we saw in that opening scene where it's like, this guy messed up my world, my family, my employees, like he's not safe. And if it had been more about that only and not like Luthor manipulating them, it would have been stronger. It would have been cooler to have seen that play out instead of this like false, this almost like this false flag sort of battle.
Yeah. And it seems like when the Senate hearings explode, mm-hmm. that's the moment that both of them would have put it together of like, Luthor just manipulated all this shit.
Well, and there's a great point.
Stopped it before the Luthor kidnapping Lois Lane part, and Martha. Like,
well, okay, let's rewind that. So him kidnapping Martha made some sense. Like, okay, he wants to hold her hostage. Why did he need to kidnap Lois Lane as well? Did that solve? What did that do? I mean, like, yeah, it got Superman out onto the tower, but he could have done that with his. He could have said. You could have put a TV alert out like, we've got Martha. Martha Kent. Why did he need to kidnap Lois Lane too? Like, what was the point? What was the point of blowing up the all of Congress or the state the U.S. Capitol? Like, why? What did that serve?
I mean, isn't that the moment that he got their attention? That's what I thought.
But like the world, it wasn't like the world was like, oh, Superman did this. Yeah, I mean, there's some conspiracy theorists, but like most people were like, yeah, that was and they saw like, yeah, the guy in the wheelchair had the bomb. Like this was meant to frame Superman. So I'm like, what was the point of all that? Other than to just
Bruce had already put it together, like. That's like the second the second before it happens, he realizes like, yeah, oh, this guy that is supposed to be receiving checks from me is not, and it just seems like when that happens, that's the moment they could have cut the next 20 minutes of Luthor scheming, and but then how do you have the I don't know. I have no explanation for it other than it's comic booky.
I know, but it felt like a movie where stuff just happens to everybody but Diana Prince. Like, she's the only character with any intention, with any purpose, with any sort of like, this is what I'm after, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Oh, this stuff's going down, I need to go help. Like, that made sense. Everything else is just like stuff happens to people and people react without any sort of, there was no thread that tied it all together other than this happens and I guess some other stuff will happen. And
you make such a good point about that. Like that Diana Prince is the only one with intention and purpose. And in fact, that's what I wanted to circle back to that. So that when she arrives, when Doomsday is attacking them and they are having this, petty superhero brawl, that I felt like I loved that moment where they all go after Doomsday because she was giving the other two that intention. Mm-hmm. It was like she had to be there to be like, no, gentlemen, focus.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know that. I mean, I know they'd already made up or whatever, but that was, I just liked it because at that point it was focused on, a common enemy, and we saw the Justice League in action. I don't know. I liked it at that point. Even though it didn't necessarily like Doomsday, that battle of it was pretty cool. And it reminded me of trailers for one of those like DC Universe video games that I thought was like so well done,
like Injustice or one of those?
Yeah, I think that was it.
Gods Among Us.
So how'd you feel about the introduction of the rest of the Justice League?
I mean, again, anything involving Lex Luthor was just like, I like the fact that we got to, I like that, and granted, there was a little marvelly with like, it was like, obligatory commercial for a future movie kind of thing. It was weird that they all had their own logo, in Lex Luthor's file. He's like, let's see, I'm going to give Flash a logo. It's going to look like this. I'm going to give Wonder Woman this WW logo. Like, I'm like, that was a little weird. I mean, I'm sure, if you don't think too hard about it, it's fine, but it's just like, why would he know that? I was also surprised. I'd kind of come to the conclusion that Ezra Miller was just not going to be the Flash because the TV show is doing so well. And I'm just like, I don't know if this kid's going to make it. But then the fact that he appeared twice, but once in a Flash, the sort of dream sequence, and then in that little sort of montage of surveillance footage, I thought it was cool. I thought it set up, those characters. It at least it gave those characters some context ahead of time. So because we're not going to have the luxury of each of them having a solo movie and then a team up movie. Right. We're jumping right to the team up movie, which might be very risky. So the more context we have, the better. We're only going to have what is that, next year that comes out, or the year after? So it's not. I enjoyed it. It wasn't so heavy handed. There wasn't like 15 minutes of Nick Fury coming in and going, okay, Bruce, this is what we're going to, it wasn't Amanda Waller coming in and being like, I kind of thought that's what it was going to be. Kind of thought, because they'd cast her for Suicide Squad, I kind of thought, oh, she's the Nick Fury of this universe. Amanda Waller is going to come walking in and be like, Bruce Wayne, I have some news for you, which would have been maybe more exciting. I don't know, but it was fine.
Well, I mean, I did think it was stupid that, somehow Luthor has this information on the superheroes and Bruce Wayne doesn't. I think that's a great point. But I did like the way that I saw more of Aquaman and Flash and Cyborg than I thought I was going to see.
I agree. Yeah.
And so that at least cheered me. Like, I really didn't know how they were going to incorporate them into the movie. And I thought it's going to be so corny if they all just sort of show up at the end and like in the battle or something, and it's, we should all work together or something,
Yeah.
So I did like that. It was like, just, it was more than just planting a seed. You actually see them all do something.
I love, by the way, that Aquaman has the sonic boom in the water that Superman does when he flies. Did you notice that? When he's like going away, it's like that boom. You're like, oh, that's that Aquaman movie could be badass if it's going to be. This is a whole other conversation, but the Wonder Woman next year is going to be very instructive. If that goes really well and looks really well, I think they're going to give Zack Snyder a lot less to do and really empower some of these other directors to hopefully do more.
Well, let's hit that in the lightning round, because we've run over every time limit that I had. So let me hit the. That'll be our lightning round signal. Although I literally had to turn the timer off twice because we just kept talking. But I'll hit my dumb opinions really quickly, which aren't actually opinions. But I was shocked to learn this week that a death you may have missed was Jimmy Olsen was the spy cameraman with Lois Lane in the Middle East.
Wait, really?
And apparently, people noticed this as soon as the movie was released because he's in the credits that way.
Huh. Did she refer to him as Jimmy at all at any point?
No, and in fact, I think he introduces himself with another name, because I remember when they showed him, I was like, oh, that's Jimmy Olsen. He's got a camera, of course. It's going to be him. And then he said, no, my name's this, and I'm with the CIA. And I was like, oh, okay, so that's not Jimmy. And then they kill him. But apparently that was him. So,
I'm going to say that's
already been wiped out of the view.
Well, there's Jenny Olsen, so that, I think they were kind of almost teeing her up to be that, but I'll believe it when I see it. That could have just easily been one of those things in the credits that they'll just, reverse at their convenience.
I wonder. So the other thing that I knew, before I saw it that Affleck, at least in some interview, had said, "Yeah, Robin is dead in our universe already," and meaning probably the Jason Todd Robin, who was famously, hilariously voted to die in the 80s by a telephone poll.
Oh, that's right.
Did.
Yeah.
So the original Robin being Dick Grayson, who has become Nightwing at that point. But what I did not understand from just viewing the movie was that in that tour of the Batcave, the uniform that has like the Joker's graffiti sprayed on it was Robin's uniform with Robin's staff. I just totally did not put that together. And I feel stupid. It was in the previews and everything.
Yeah, but why would Robin have a whatever the hell that weapon was? It was
sometimes carried a staff.
Really?
Like a bow staff kind of thing.
I didn't know that. Okay.
And I can't exactly trace it, and I don't know if it's Red Robin who started doing it or
Red Robin.
Whatever. Yeah, there's a Red Robin actually, but it's. I guess it's a thing that's been around, and I guess that's how we were supposed to know. Oh, that's Robin. Whereas I just thought he.
Wouldn't it be great if the
some old Batman uniform?
Wouldn't it be great if the Batfleck directed Batman movie was how that happened?
Well, hopefully they're going to move. I mean, I would just kind of assume that they're setting their way up for oh crap, her name just escaped me, for the Dark Knight Robin. Whose name is still escaping, so some geek will correct me if I can't get to it. Yes. So that was just sort of my dumb assumption, was that might be Carrie, that they're it'll just be a team up with Barbara Gordon. The other thing that I was going to say in our lightning round was like the Batman with the gun thing. I thought was I get that critique, but Batman has always used guns and rocket launchers and missiles and everything on his cars and airplanes. And I don't, to me, it's contradictory to say, well, he's never going to hold a handgun because that's how his parents were murdered. But he's going to use all these other guns. And I just thought in that big scene where he's freeing Martha and he shoots several guns several times, that was kind of classic Batman of like, he's causing chaos and he's misdirecting and things like that, but he's not necessarily killing people with the guns.
Well, he was mowing down people like crazy though in the Batmobile, like that entire sequence when he's in the car, like half of those people die. It reminded me a lot of Burton Batman, where Michael Keaton just, whoever was in the way, he just flat out murder. It's like, whatever, only this time it was almost worse because that almost kind of felt like whatevs. This kind of felt like, I'm going to brand you so that you get murdered in prison. It's like, what the hell? Like it just, it didn't bug me so much. It just felt very, it felt very 80s. It felt like I was watching one of those classic like Burton Batman movies all of a sudden. Like, all right, well, whatever.
Yeah, it's weird for sure. I mean, it's not that I'm not troubled by that because I just don't think it's like as weighty a criticism as as people think it is, because it's like we've seen him use some kind of gun weapon in every movie. Yeah. So
I just think a lot of fans have resigned themselves to anything involving Zack Snyder is now referred to as the DC Murderverse.
I really think that's what it was, and that's how that was one of the notes on the lightning round was I was saying it was this article I read right before it came out was about just how freaking successful it really was. I mean, it was over 800 million. Yep. 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I'd read this article in Forbes about how long it took Marvel to top that number. Even when you look at like how successful the Iron Man was, it only did 585 worldwide. So and then that article had these great things about how like the Hulk did this like 600 million or something like that, but it still was less than Shrek Forever After.
Jeez, well.
And it's it is a very strange paradox that we look at. There's been this chorus of Batman v Superman was a letdown, but it really was successful, and I don't know. I'm just wondering how that's going to set us up.
I think it was a critical letdown, and there's enough stink on it to influence how they proceed with their next movies. I think Suicide Squad is going to be very. So let's actually do some true lightning rounds.
Yeah, are you hit that?
Are you excited for Suicide Squad after seeing this? Yes or no?
Well, I haven't really been excited for it at all. I am a little bit more excited based on the last trailer, the Ballroom Blitz trailer. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we see a Batmobile in that one.
Yep.
And so that was really what kind of excited me for that. Honestly, it was just Batman. I do not care about the Suicide Squad. I really am, just I don't know what I'm supposed to like in that movie. Like, oh, it's a bunch of jerks all together.
Oh my God. Are you excited about the Justice League Part 1, having seen this?
Well, let me throw one of those to you. I mean, what do you think about the Justice League? Does it set you up, or does it let you down? Does it adjust those expectations?
I will wait and see after Wonder Woman. We'll see what see what that movie is, and then I'll reserve judgment until after that.
And the week that we're recording this, we've gotten news that Seth Grahame-Smith, I believe I got that name right, has dropped off as the director of The Flash. And then you told me just as we started this call that
it's just in. Yep.
Yeah. Was it Aquaman?
Yep. Aquaman, that director is potentially, James Wan is potentially, or Jim Wan, whatever his name is potentially leaving as well. I think in the way they're positioning it's because of the now increased pressure following sort of the release, the lukewarm release of Batman v Superman. They're looking at it like, well, maybe we should tweak this, or maybe we should. They're kind of pulling back on some of the creative control that they had given them previously. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a really interesting topic that we should go into, in some longer podcast sometime, because we've touched on it with the Marvel movies and, on the sort of individuals that set them up for that. And Zack Snyder was definitely set up as like the DCU guy. And now it just
Kevin
seems
Feige
like,
of DC.
Yeah. Now it just seems like that, they don't necessarily have the trust in his vision that they may have once had. Feige's a good one, but I think Favreau did such a good job with those first two Iron Mans that it's
absolutely. He doesn't get enough credit. And if anything, Favreau's having the last laugh because Jungle Book is doing amazingly well right now. Like, it's being really well received. It's achieved, and it's a movie that was shot, a jungle movie that was shot entirely in downtown Los Angeles in a state, in a building, which is amazing. So there's I feel like Favreau is getting his second wind right now, because he had kind of disappeared for a little while.
Yeah, but I don't think he got pushed out. I think that was his choice. He saw.
Agreed.
He saw the massive opportunity behind Cowboys and Aliens.
Cowboys and Aliens really put the stamp on him, though, I think. Which it's too bad.
Right. I think that was It wasn't that. It was that that was the movie that kind of. But I loved some of his other work. I love Chef. That was a great movie.
Chef was really good. Yeah, I mean, sorry to go off on another tangent, but if you're still listening and you have Netflix, go find Chef.
Yeah, it's
amazing, amazing little heartfelt movie, indie movie.
But I've pointed out before, Favreau. He was Foggy Nelson in Daredevil with Ben Affleck. So that guy
was he really?
Yeah, he is Marvel. He was on Team Marvel.
Oh my God!
So
was he? I have not seen that. I have not seen it all the way through. Number one, but it's been so long. I had no idea he actually appeared in it.
Yeah, he did.
He was also, by the way, if you want to go way back, he was an extra or at least a production assistant on the Val Kilmer Batman and Robin.
Really?
Back in 97, or 95. Yeah. It's a blink and you miss it name in the credits, and it says Jon Favreau. You're like, oh my God, he was banging around this stuff like a long time ago.
Well, when we played that game, I think the great thing to point out is that Ben Affleck played the actor George Reeves, who played Superman on TV in Hollywoodland in 2006, and Diane Lane was in that movie with him.
6 Degrees. 6 Degrees. Ben Affleck's going to take that mantle from Kevin Bacon. Let me do a couple more quick little yes or no questions for you. Oh. Did you like Ben Affleck as Bruce Wayne / Batman?
I did like him. Yeah, for sure.
Do you still like Henry Cavill as Superman?
Yeah, I like Henry Cavill as Superman. I mean, I think both of them work together well for this dark universe that DCU is creating.
Did you like Jeremy Irons as Alfred?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would go as far as you did with best Alfred ever. I mean, if I could do a Michael Caine impression, I would break one out right now. But
she was only 16. So I'm not going to bury another Batman. to borrow literally from the Trip or whatever that.
I know. Yeah,
movie is, which is awesome too. Michael Caine, give him his props. He was great, but I love the fact that Jeremy Irons was, you know, he was skilled. He was kind of the voice of reason, bizarrely enough. And you could tell he had been around, you know, he felt perfect for a Batman that had been around for about 20 years. So clearly Alfred at that point is going to know a lot about how to fix the stuff, how to basically be Batman in all but physicality. You know, and I just felt like that it was more of a, how do I want to put it? Well, he was less like the butler and more like the the guy, you know, the guy in all the spy movies, like the, you know, like the Benji in Mission Impossible, or like any of those kinds of. He's the cute, and it just that felt appropriate for where that story was at that point. You know,
I agree totally, and I think you know, all hail Michael Caine, but Irons did make it like he was a better character in that sense of like, this is the comic book Alfred, who has always been like, was an army medic and, you know, worked on the Batmobile and was the gadget guy and the detective and stuff. Although I do, you know, Caine did so much of that in the last two Chris Nolan movies.
Yeah.
You know, I love seeing him when they had the alternate Bat Cave that was like in the city, you know, he did a ton of the detective work for, you know, Christian Bale there. So, but yeah, I love Jeremy Irons as
Jeremy Irons also didn't pull focus, which is important because there's a lot of these movies where he just hams it up so much. You're like, oh God, Jeremy Irons. Like, this is one where he just kind of, he was a great bass player. He just kind of held steady, did his thing. You know, he just kind of fit into the ensemble, but what he did was incredibly solid. I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I agree. Were there any other ups or downs that we may have missed in this synopsis?
I mean,
Batman?
I could nitpick scenes and stuff, but I think we more or less covered it.
Yeah, I actually, you saying all that, it kind of puts my my joy at seeing it in perspective. Like, I'm like, now I got to go back and watch it and think, was I just excited to see another Batman movie? Clouded my judgment.
Well, let's sum it up this way. I went in with optimistic expectations. You know, like kind of I'm going to hope for the best on this thing. I'm not, you know, even though everybody's like ragging on it, it might be better than I think, and came away more disappointed. Did you go in the opposite way?
Yes.
Okay.
I went in thinking at this point, I think it's going to be a real bomb. And so when it was not, I think I was much more cheered by that. You know,
you got a regular Subway sandwich and not a shit sandwich, and so you were happy with, you know.
The Subway sandwich is so much better than that Togo sandwich I had last week.
You got a Panera artisan sandwich, and you expected a Subway sandwich.
Bingo.
And I went in hoping for a market fresh sandwich from Arby's, and got sort of a bowl of soup from McDonald's. And you're like, what is this?
I didn't even know they made soup.
Exactly.
Is this just Coca-Cola over ground beef?
Exactly. You're just more confused than anything. You're like, I guess, you know, that's all right.
Well, I mean, you know,
food.
that all plays into the perceptions of movies. I appreciate that we have such. Should we quickly plug? It's funny too that like right around seeing this, we both read Wonder Woman Earth 1.
Yeah, you know what? And it's interesting too, because I now have in my head a ideal Wonder Woman based, you know, from this movie alone. I'm like, this is what I want my Wonder Woman to be. So
did you read it before you went to the movie?
Yes. And I've been,
so you kind of had a new background for her in your head when you went in.
And for our listeners, if you don't know, this is Earth 1 Wonder Woman. It's by Grant Morrison, and Yannick, I forget his last name, is the artist. It's been talked about for like 2.5, 3 years. Grant Morrison's been talking about this thing and like, you know, hyping it up. And I'm like, I've always been very curious. So I ended up just grabbing it. It's hardcover. And it's, you know, it's got its high, much like the movie, it's got its high points and low points. There's a lot really intriguing, good stuff, especially on, you know, her origin, like, you know, where she actually came from, which was really cool how they helped, you know, handle that. But there's a lot of it. It's just like, what is this? Like, it just doesn't, I don't know. I don't want to, that's funny, a whole other podcast.
It's long on exposition, which is just, it looks gorgeous. And the way they've recast some of that origin is really interesting, but it's really short on action. It's sort of the opposite of Batman v Superman, which it was like sort of, you know, gobbling up exposition for the sake of having big action scenes. So
Well, and they did so much, and I hate to keep harping on this, but they did so much with Gal Gadot. But I mean, there was very much a less is more character. Like, she had very little dialogue, but when she was on screen, like, it was just so mysterious and cool and interesting. Like, you could sort of put your own, sort of expectations and curiosity into that character. It was like they did it. So they handled that pitch perfectly the entire time. It was her in that movie was as good as Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk in Avengers. It felt that same, like, oh my God, these guys know exactly what they're doing with her.
Right. We're taking this person that could easily just be sort of decoration and like giving them real substance. And I totally agree. And I think that almost redeems the whole movie, because for all these criticisms of, what would Batman, what Superman would never kill, Batman's using guns, blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, but we've told the Superman and Batman story so many times. I mean, it's got to be so hard to, like, satisfy any expectations of, we're staying true to the character, but we're offering something new. Whereas Wonder Woman was like, that was pitch perfect, just right in the sweet spot. So
I'm listening to the theme as we speak too. The Wonder Woman Hans Zimmer theme. It sounds like something out of Mad Max too. You almost expected the doof warrior to be like on his, on the amp guitar thing on the back of the truck, like playing the guitar part. Is
I thought you meant you were listening to the Linda Carter theme, and they're like,
no. Like every time that came on, I'm just like, I got excited.
Yeah,
I got excited.
Well, so we broke all our rules in season 2, episode 1. We hit 20 minutes like before we even mentioned Batman.
Just like Batman, we break all the rules.
So we're definitely not going to call this like the 30-minute podcast.
Maybe next time.
Yeah, but I enjoy talking about one subject with a little bit more energy and depth, than when we try to shotgun out a bunch of opinions on different things that are going on all week. Because so much goes on all week that we can't summarize it all. And I don't remember which button on my sound effects machine is the closing music button, but I'm going to try to find that. You tell me where we can find you online.
You can find me online at Taylor Trask, TaylorTrask on Twitter, and other very, Google me, you'll find the other spots as well.
Sure. And I am at Hey Todd A on Twitter, and the two of us have a website at toddandtaylor.com. We don't really know we don't have set days for releasing episodes from season 2 of our podcast.
No, not yet.
But our Game of Thrones podcast definitely has a day that it comes out. What day is that?
That is Wednesday, folks. Wednesday in Westeros. It's in the name. If you're sitting there wondering, when does Wednesday in Westeros come out? It's not Sunday. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, it's Wednesdays. So it's like the perfect split. We watch it on Sunday. We talk about it on Monday. And then we release the podcast on Wednesday to give you kind of a review and kind of hype you up for the next week. And
exactly, perfect midway, perfect. Little quenching your thirst for Game of Thrones while you wait in between episodes. So
exactly, and totally search for us on iTunes. If you go to toddandtaylor.com, you will find all of our past episodes and seasons. Our home base is SoundCloud for all of our podcasts, where we keep our show notes and links to a bunch of the stuff that we talk about. So we'll try to throw in some of these articles that we were referring to when we put this episode up. But until the next time, that was not the one I anticipated.
I like that one better. That's until next time.
All right. We have been Todd and Taylor.
Bye-bye.